Welcome back to Talking with Ted, and this time we are going to talk about plants that you should stay away from. Now, I usually encourage people to touch them, smell them, maybe even taste them in the effort to figure out what they are, their identity. But there are some plants that are a source of concern and may harm you significantly, so we're going to run through a few of them. But first, since we are all about libraries and books, we're going to talk about a couple of books first. And the first one I want to talk about is Nature's Garden. All right, now this one is about edible plants, but he does give an interesting overview of plants that could be dangerous. All right, so I'm going to read this first little part. He has a section here at page 41. This is a guide to identifying, harvesting, and preparing edible wild plants. Nature's Garden by Samuel Thayer. All right, top-notch guy. He says, about 10 years ago, a man approached me after a presentation that I had given on wild edibles. And the title of this section is Poisonous Plant Fables. All right, fables. Obviously quite agitated, he stuttered a few syllables before launching a frantic diatribe. You need to warn people that there are some edible plants that look exactly like deadly poisonous plants, and they grow side by side, and nobody can tell them apart. Nobody, not even an expert. I paused in a mild state of shock before responding. That's not really true. Some plants might. It is true, he interrupted. Books tell people they can eat these plants, but they don't tell them that there's deadly poisonous plants that look exactly the same. It's like playing Russian roulette. Of course it isn't true, but the fear of wild plants runs very deep in Western civilization. While it certainly is true that people can poison themselves with wild vegetation, the fear that we attribute to plants is monstrously out of proportion with the actual danger they pose. All right, now that word proportion is very important. All right, I was told by somebody named my boss not to eat a poisonous plant when talking about poisonous plants. And usually when I'm told not to do something, I probably will do it, okay? Now, this plant is very tasty. It is oxalis. And Samuel Thayer goes into great detail about how marvelous this plant is. It was the first edible plant he sampled as a child, and they would eat it all the time. It has a slightly acidic flavor to it, okay? Because it has oxalic acid in it. Now, our other friend, Delena Tull, in her book, Edible and Useful Plants of the Southwest, says this about this plant. Wood sorrel, oxalis species. Warning. The sour taste of wood sorrel is caused by oxalic acid. When wood sorrel is eaten in moderation, okay, there you have the key word, moderation. Now, I was told by someone in my family recently, proportion means nothing. If it's bad for you, it's bad for you. All right, that is not true. As Delena Tull is telling us, moderation. And there are some other examples that I want to go through here where if you eat a plant, that's fine, but if you eat too much of it, that's a problem. This is not a new thing. All right, I was told back when I took emergency medical technology at Phoenix College by a paramedic teaching the class, if you breathe a very good thing, pure oxygen, and you breathe nothing but pure oxygen for 3 days, you will be dead. All right, so proportion matters significantly. She goes on to say, in moderation, the oxalic acid poses no problem. Okay, but overconsumption of plants with this substance can cause a problem, all right? So proportion is critical. Now, I was asked the other day by another person about what book he could use to plant an edible landscape, okay? Now, we've got some videos on this, but I mentioned this book, okay? And the challenge is, what is the challenge in Arizona? There are 4,000 species in Arizona. All right, so we've established one principle that moderation, proportion is important. All right, the second one is identification is crucial. As I mentioned in our edible plant video, if you don't know what it is, for sure, you don't eat it. Okay, so identification. Now the problem is in Arizona there's 4,000 species of plants. More than any other state in the nation except for California, Texas, and Florida. They have seacoasts, we don't, which is a big diversity factor. So you have a good chance of being wrong. Now, I've mentioned some plants like, or books like this, which help to identify the plants. Now, books like this are important to do so because you have to have accurate identification. Unfortunately, these books don't include all the plants because there are so many in Arizona, and there's various ways to approach that, okay? They don't tell you though what you can do with the plant usually. So then you need books like this to tell you what you can do with it. All right, so you have to incorporate both elements, and oftentimes it gets too confusing, people give up, they throw in the towel, and they just stay away. Well, like Samuel Thayer is saying, they're missing out on a lot of good things, all right? And we just have to approach it with information. Now, the other issue, and Delena Tull brings this out. She says that there is no, page 227, plant poisoning, dispelling some myths about poisonous plants. She asked, how can you tell a poisonous plant from a non-poisonous one? Contrary to some popular ideas about plants, no generalizations can help. I've heard of some people taking a test or, suggesting a test. Oh, you chew it this long or whatever, and then you'll know. No, there is no general rule. Well, there might be one. We could ask, for example, we're out there hiking with Lisa, and we might say, Lisa, they say this is edible. What do you think? And you give it to the person you're with, and if they pass it, no, I'm just kidding. You would not do that, ever. Okay, so there is no generalized test to determine if a plant is poisonous as far as the universe of plants. All right, then she gives 3 myths. Myth number 1, if animals eat it, it must be safe for humans. Not true. Different digestive systems, different adaptability, and all that. So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. All right, we are different organisms, and if it's okay for them, it does not mean it's okay for us. Myth number 2, the color of the berry tells you if it is edible. People have often said, red, oh, no good. Well, strawberries, cherries, apples, all right. So red obviously means nothing. Okay, so color is not an indicator. And myth number 3, all flowers are edible. All right, that is not true. There are some, cactus flowers, for example, that are edible, but there are some that are not, like Jimson weed. Okay, and all parts of some plants are poisonous, while other plants, only some parts. Season matters, but again, it's about proportion. Okay, so that's the start. In Samuel Thayer's book, I will mention one last thing. He gives careful analysis of Chris McCandless and how he died in Alaska. So here's the book, there's the movie as well. And John Krakauer, as the author of the book, suggests he was poisoned. All right, and Samuel Thayer disputes that, suggesting rather that Chris McCandless did not have enough calories and he simply starved to death. He was not poisoned. Okay, so you can look at the evidence, look at those sources, and understand better what is happening out there and with what's going to happen with you. All right. So it is hard for me to imagine some people eating some of these plants or sampling them. All right. But sometimes the problem is simply touching them. Some of these plants in the first group that we're going to talk about have a physical hazard to present. And we've talked about some oddball plants, and they have spines and thorns and prickles, all right, and they can make you bleed, all right, and that is a hazardous situation. So some of those plants are relatively easy to stay away from, but there's even another example of a physical danger that we'll get into here at the end that you can't see until it's too late, all right, actually a couple of things. So, cacti, obviously, have a lot of spines to be concerned about. A spine is a modified leaf. There are some plants that have thorns, and you can't always see them until you stick your hand in there, all right? And so approach these things cautiously. Deerbrush, crucifixion thorn, ocotillo, gray thorn, wolfberry, hackberry. Someone asked me one time, that was from Indiana, why are there so many thorny plants in the Southwest and the desert? I do not really know why that is. That strategy has been employed here perhaps more than other places that are wetter, more mesic, but that's just the case. So don't be a bull in a china shop and just crash through the brush thinking that it's not going to be a problem, because it could very well be a problem along with other things in there like snakes and stuff. Okay, and then finally we have prickles. Okay, a thorn is a modified branch, spine is a modified leaf, and a prickle are those little cat claw-like structures on roses, New Mexican locust, for example, cat claw, also called wait a minute bush for a good reason. All right, and so those three physical structures are the first obvious ones to pay attention to. You have to pay close attention to detail when you're out in these areas. Now, some of these plants that have this armature have edible parts, okay, so they can have a physical problem presented, but then there's other aspects that you can utilize for your good, so you just have to know how to handle them. Common one we talked about is barberry, all right, and that Fremontia, the genus, and in the Southwest, very spiny edged leaf, all right, but when you pick the berries, you just have to not, grab things, you have to be gentle, okay. So, spiny leaves as well. All right, now we're going to talk about, again, a physical structure like agave, which is a cluster of spiny leaves with prickles along the edge too, and you just cannot handle this thing without getting hurt. Desert spoon is a related member as well, yucca, etc. All right, but even more so, the agave citrus plant has a sap that is extremely irritating to your skin. It's hard to imagine that the pulp down at the bottom before it flowers is what was used traditionally to make tequila. Well, prior to that stage, at least, the sap in this plant, if you're out working it and getting rid of it, or if the thorns and the prickles don't keep you away, the sap, if you get into this thing, is going to be very unpleasant. So don't touch it, okay? Other often or common that everybody knows about and refers to is poison ivy. All right, so you have this subshrub in the Southwest, usually growing along in wetter places, canyons, along streams and so forth, and it has these three leaflets, it has flowers that you can't really tell, and so it looks like just a nice friendly plant. But you can walk through it, you got shorts, hiking shorts or something on, and it could start irritating you very badly. Now, not everybody is subject to that. So these plants and how a person reacts to them is not universal either. I've handled poison ivy a few times, gently, not trying to push the issue, and I've not had a itching, irritating reaction to it. So it's not a black and white situation. Plants vary, people vary, okay, to susceptibility. All right, now, besides the external touching of things, let's move on to some of the chemical toxins in some of these plants. And one of them is Indian paintbrush. Now, this is a lovely wildflower. We've talked about it in the red wildflowers of the desert and the mountains, and it's very widespread. And it is edible, all right? Even has a kind of a nice little flavor to it because of the nectar that's in it, but it collects selenium. If selenium is in the soil, how do you know if selenium is in the soil? You don't know that, all right? So what do? If you want to eat it, you can eat it, but don't eat too much of it, all right? And that just is a common sense approach. Wild plants versus something you buy in the store does not have a regulatory agency determining, oh, it meets all the criteria. They, made sure that it's, clean and, fresh or whatever, all right? This is just out there in the wild and there's just no controls over it. So some plants have high concentrations of this or that and the other ones don't, and there's just no way to know, all right? So moderation, again, is the key. Then there are some plants like poison hemlock, which we've talked about with the white flower, the video and the wildflowers. And it's, again, a plant that grows around wet sources, and it has an umbel, like an umbrella arrangement to the flowers. This one is like, very well known, ancient, Socrates drank some of this stuff and it killed him. So highly toxic, all parts of the plant. It's in the carrot though, family, all right? And there's obviously some members of this family that are very edible, beneficial, and have been for a long time, all right? So, but recognize, so what's the key? Identity, accurate identification. And while some plants can be confusing, then you just stay away from it and you don't push it, okay? Unless you're absolutely positive of what it is, then you just don't handle it. You don't eat it. You don't touch it. All right, now another plant is in the honeysuckle family, and it is called Snowberry. And now you would look at this plant, which is again an understory forest, very lush, very lovely, no thorns, spines, or prickles, and it's just honeysuckle. How can you go wrong with the honeysuckle family? There are members of this family that are edible, okay, like twinberry, all right, Arizona honeysuckle. But this one has white berries about the size of a pea, and they are not edible. Okay, I have eaten a couple of them just to check them out, what the flavor is like, but they are just not something, again, why would somebody eat these things? They just aren't palatable, okay? So you'd have to force yourself to eat it, and right off the bat, it's like not something you're gonna do, okay? All right, so honeysuckle family. Next, we have the Buttercup family, and there are several very toxic members. Baneberry, which has a bright red spike of fruits on it, all right, and these have these big divided leaves with the toothed margins, okay, and so the flowers are not particularly noteworthy, but the fruit is like outstanding. You would just see this thing from not quite a mile away, but a little ways away, all right, so a cluster of red berries, and it is something you're going to stay away from. Another member in this family that's toxic is larkspur. Now, larkspur is a flower, but again, can't see why somebody would eat it. There's no fleshy, fruity, attractive part to it, but it just has all these bad chemicals in it that will hurt you. And so, but it has a very prominent spur, like a point sticking out of it on the flower. Tall stalk, purplish flowers, very distinctive larkspur. It does grow in the desert, but mostly up in the mountain, wet sites. Now again, if you're going to eat something out there, you're going to have water. So you're going to need to be in a wet site, and that's where some of these things are going to show up. Another member of the same family, growing in the same kind of place, is monk's hood, and it looks weird because the flower looks like the hood that a monk would wear, all right? And so purple, large leaves, divided, serrated margins, and the peculiar distinctive shape of the flower is going to be quite recognizable, okay? So accurate identification, once again, is the key. Next, the potato family. Again, lots of members of this family, edible potatoes, tomatoes, all right? But nightshade, for example, with either yellow or black fruits. Now, Samuel Thayer claims that the black fruited ones are okay, but don't take a chance on it unless you're really being Mr. or Miss Edible Plant expert, all right, sampling things. but it also has spines on the stem. I grabbed once and some weeds in Phoenix there one time, and my hand was just covered in spines. So again, don't be a bull in a china shop. Approach these things gingerly, all right? But it has these fruits on it, either yellow or black, and considering the high concentration of alkaloids and other chemicals like nicotine in this tobacco potato family, leave it alone. Okay, tree tobacco, another example, all right, in this family with a tall, kind of a attractive tree, kind of thin, spindly, but it has long tubular yellow flowers, often down in the desert, kind of in canyon environments, but highly toxic, lots of chemicals. Another one, finally, in this family is sacred datura or Jimson weed, Jamestown weed, angel's trumpet, goes by a lot of names, thorn apple. The problem with this one, besides it being toxic, is that it also has hallucinogenic properties, and people have used it to hallucinate, and then they overdo it, and they die, all right? That's one reason it's called angel's trumpet, because the angels use the long tubular flowers, big, white, you know, showy, to blow a trumpet over you because you're dead, all right? So this is not something to play with. Stay away. All right, now we have the Pea family, lupins, and not only are the blue bonnets, you know, Texas state flower, very distinctive, divided leaves, you know, from one source. They're called digitate, recognizable easily, and there's, you know, quite a few species. I think I've got 26 species. They're all poisonous, and not just for people, but livestock. Sheep have been poisoned by this extensively across the Southwest for many years, all right? So it's bad news. It's nice to look at. Wildflower, don't mess with it. Probably don't touch it, but it's not gonna hurt you if you just touch it, take a picture, and then leave it. All right, loco weed. Now that obviously is named that for a reason, all right? Now there's even more species of loco weed, 80 species of loco weed. Divided leaves, sometimes the pea pod is a bladder, it's inflated, all right? But again, the butterfly-shaped flowers in all of this group of the pea family, once you see them, you will recognize them. And it's just one of the biggest families on the planet. Alfalfa, for example, lots of animal forage, wildflowers, soybeans, all those, you know, have this, you know, kind of flower. Palo Verde, its family member, a little different flower shape. Ironwood is this shape of flower. So it's just everywhere, all right? Mesquite is in this family, though different, has a little shape of a flower that varies. So it's huge, it's important, but it has some toxic elements that you can just appreciate from a distance. Finally, New Mexican locust. Now I was hiking on the Prescott Circle Trail in the spring when this flowers. It's a shrub covered in prickles, so it has that physical hazard, but the flowers are edible in this case, all right? And I took some flowers, and of course what I ask people on the trail is they say it's edible. What do you think? And of course everybody runs away until I eat it, and then they still run away. But the pods are not edible, they're sticky, they have some resin and stuff on them, but the flowers are edible. So again, it's knowing what to eat, when to eat it, accurate identification is critical. Another family that is quite distinctive, these things are like weird looking, like milkweeds. And now milkweeds include a lot of variety, different shapes of flowers, colors of flowers. The fruit is what is consistent. I was just hiking on Sunset Crater, and there was a pod, and they have these seeds, hundreds of seeds, and they little silky hairs, and they just dance across the landscape there in the wind. It's just totally peaceful and mesmerizing and beautiful, but the sap is milky, and oftentimes with the milky sap, just it's a warning, like don't mess with me, okay? Not every milky sap thing, figs have milky sap. I eat figs every year. Okay, so it's not always bad, but it's like, wait a minute, slow down, check it out, double check, and make sure you're not encroaching into danger. Okay, so milkweeds, usually they're wildflower things, but there are probably some woody plants from other parts of the world. Next, morning glory. Okay, now this family is not considered very edible, but it has sweet potatoes in it. Okay, so there's an edible part. Okay, but when you see these very distinctive, recognizable, again, this is helping you to identify it. It is such a beautiful circular flower with the star-shaped little designs in it. And once you see a morning glory flower, you probably won't miss it, okay? But they are toxic. Don't mess with them. Don't try to eat them, okay? Mistletoe. Now, mistletoe, again, there are desert species which have edible berries in them, all right? But there's so much effort because they're so tiny, it's like, why would you even bother with it? But they are edible. The ones up in the mountains with the white berries are not edible. Those are toxic. All right, so you have the red berries in the desert, which are okay, but the white berries up in the mountains, and of course, what is also helpful to you is what they parasitize on. Or up in the mountains, it's probably a juniper or an oak, and then you'll have this, even in the winter, this greenish thing with these white berries on it, okay? And it was very much a mystery to the ancients in Europe and so forth, how this could live in this harsh winter condition. Okay, so they thought it was like magical and all that. But the berries and the higher elevation mistletoe are toxic. All right, last. Like with the poison ivy, we've got sumac. Now, sumac is in the same family, the Anacardiaceae, the cashew family. Again, so cashews are edible, but these other members of this family, this is a shrub-y plant with divided leaves, and in the fall, brilliant red color, totally beautiful. We don't get a lot of fall color in Arizona, but this is one that does. But the sap and the fruit of this is going to be an irritant or toxic if you were to try to eat it. Spurge, all right? The spurge you probably know is poinsettia in Christmas time, right? Milky sap again, very funky, weird flowers, and people, kids, animals, these plants brought into the home, they're poisonous. So you've got to maintain a safe distance. And last but not least, physical and chemical hazard to your health is stinging nettle. All right, now I was collecting plants for my master's, thesis there in the Grand Mountains, and I grabbed this plant, put it in the plant press, and about 2 seconds later, my hands were on fire. All right, so they have these very invisible, not totally invisible, but you just don't notice these stinging little hairs on this plant, and they will inject this fluid into you, and it will just drive you nuts. Now, fortunately, it is only temporary for a few seconds, maybe a few minutes, all right? But you wouldn't know this. It's not going to have like big spines and stuff. So go slow, know what you're looking at, and if you have any questions, just stay away from it. And that's our coverage of some of the plants, a sample of stay away plants in the Southwest. See you next time.